Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar today, Learning to Remember, Teaching Memory Strategies in Adult Education. And it's my pleasure to now introduce Dan Griffith. He's with Essential Education. They've been a wonderful sponsor of COABE in the field of adult education. So Dan, thank you for sponsoring this. This is really a wonderful opportunity for our field. So I'd like to turn this over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to try to share here and see if, let's see, let me do that again. There we go. Well, thanks, Sharon. We sure appreciate the opportunity we have to sponsor these webinars and to contribute to COABE. It's a great working relationship we have with you, and I think together there's a lot of good things that are going on in the field, and hopefully you all are receiving a great deal of the benefit of these webinars and the other tools from the COABE virtual conference. We had a great time at that. It was so cool to have so many sessions to choose from and participate in. At Essential Education, this was one of the webinars that really stuck out to us because we built all of our content around Bloom's mastery learning principles. And in doing that, we really tried to create content that is memorable for students. That's something that they can latch onto and hold on to and really demonstrate mastery of, rather than just quickly, be able to do it on a test. And so we've launched a new 21 book series that I think exemplifies this in a lot of ways, our ABE Essentials program that includes a virtual tutor. So it lets the student have the print content. It lets them use a QR code on their cell phone to pull up the actual lesson that includes audio and visual and tools that the student can use in answering questions. It's very engaging. The content is all contextualized. It's mobile ready, so it works on any device, and it's all been made ADA compliant. So if you have students who are using screen readers or other tools like that for disabilities, the programs have all been aligned with that. So if you'd like any more information on that, my information's down at the bottom here, dan@essentialed.com. If you'd like a sample or a demo in our program, if you'd like to see how we build materials that will really strengthen that learning experience and provide a more memorable learning opportunity for students, please just reach out to me. I'll get you connected to the right folks, and we'll get you set up with demos. So thanks, Sharon. You guys, I'll turn it back over to you at this point.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan. And I can't really say enough about the partnership with Essential Education. It's really been excellent over all these years that we've worked together, really since 2010. We actually met at the IACA conference, which is interesting because Sarah Goldhammer, who's going to be our presenter today, that's where we met when they were there in 2010 in Chicago with the COABE conference there. So thank you, Dan. Really appreciate the partnership.
Yep.
So after the webinar, everybody's going to receive a certificate of participation that's going to come to you within 24 hours. You'll also be able to check out the slides and resources. They'll be available on the Adult Educators Repository within 48 hours. And I also want to give a hats off here to Essential Education because they were the primary sponsor of the Adult Educator Repository. Wanted to mention really quick, we have the COABE Journal. Right now there's a workforce edition that's out. We've been interviewing all of the wonderful authors. You might be interested in hearing why they wrote for the journal and what they hope each of the readers will take away. So that's on coabe.org/journal. They're also available on Amazon and Kindle, by the way. Also, we have upcoming the Racial Equity and Immigrant Integration edition of the COABE Journal. That will be coming out in the late fall or early spring. We want to encourage you to write for the journal if you're a person of color in particular, but anybody can. And articles are being accepted until September 15th. Also, this opportunity is going to pass by August 1st. So if you're interested in your program receiving $1,000 to bring the Applied Digital Skills curriculum to your local program, I want to encourage you to go to coabe.org/Google. And you'll be able to learn about this opportunity, as well as if you're interested in being a trainer for the Google initiative, you'll receive $200 every time that you train. So there's some really nice opportunities here as we build a network of trainers and also as we build a network of local programs that are implementing applied digital skills. We're also going to have regional meetings. They'll take place on Mondays at 2 Eastern Time every other month. I want to encourage you to go to the COABE Regional tab for more details. As well, many of you are aware that we just finished up our national virtual conference that took place from June 29th through July 9th. Wow, that was amazing. There was over 3,200 people that joined us for this. If you joined us and have not completed the conference evaluation, I want to encourage you to do so. You can also register a complimentary guest, and you can watch sessions that you missed for 6 more months. We will be in Nashville, Tennessee on 2021. And this is really exciting to us because the site is huge. This is an excellent opportunity for social distancing, as well as we're going to have a virtual component. So it's going to be a hybrid component. This is going to be an event you won't want to miss. You can join us from your home. You can join us in person. So just want to encourage you, keep an eye out for the mini grants that will be coming out. We'll be offering 50 mini grants out to the field to attend this conference. Also, really quickly, many of you are aware that we conducted a survey of our members on COVID-19's impact, and wow, some wonderful findings there that we shared with OCTAE, we've shared with legislators. We decided to open the survey back up so you can go online, you can complete the survey, and also there's a number of resources that are available for professional development there. We call them COVID-19 resources. They're free of charge to as members. Also, we wanted to mention that we did hold our Advocacy April to bring in $1 billion of funding for adult education, and we're starting to see the effect of that. So in the most recent bill that was put through on the House side, that we saw for the first time $1 billion for adult education included in there. So we're very hopeful. We just put out an alert recently, I want to say 2 days ago, asking members to take action again. Please take action. There really is a chance that we could get funding to deal with the negative impact of COVID, as many of our programs have had to go virtual. And finally, I'm very excited to introduce Sarah Goldammer. I had mentioned to you, I had met her in 2010 at the COABE IACA National Conference, and she has so much to offer. And so I'm going to take a moment just to read her bio. And so you too will be able to see what a wonderful presenter we have here today. So this is Sarah Goldammer from Chicago. Sarah Goldammer is an educational training specialist in the Southern Illinois Professional Development Center, which is part of the Illinois Community College Board Service Center Network. She's a certified trainer for the Special Learning Needs Institute and trains individuals throughout the state. She spearheaded the creation of the statewide contextualized curricula for healthcare, for manufacturing, for TDL, and for career pathways. She served as part of the professional development team for the Accelerating Opportunity Initiative, the development of a bridge development basics training, and implementation of new integrated education and training models. She has presented at numerous national and state conferences and in person and online. Sarah has been involved in adult education for the past 19 years, has been teaching and training for over 30 years. She is proud to have had students from age 3 to 83 years old and every age in between. And with that, I welcome Sarah Goldammer.
Thank you, Sharon. Let me bring up my screen. Oops.
And while Sarah's bringing up her screen, if you would like to welcome her in the chat box and let her know where you're calling in from, and then also you can put your questions in the Q&A. It looks great, I can see it.
All right, that's always good news.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you everybody for joining me. Thank you, Sharon, for introducing me. As Sharon mentioned, I am a lifelong educator. I'm proud that this is my 20th year in adult education, and I just have to say my original training was in special education, so you'll see some of my SPEDS roots through this. I also want to mention to you a couple of things before we get started. First of all, I really encourage you to be very engaged. This, depending on where you are in the country, you might have the afternoon slump going on. For some of you, you might have just eaten lunch and you're tired. So wherever you are, I encourage you when I say, will you stand up and be recognized and that kind of thing, and you think, is she for real? The answer is yes. I really do want you to stand up, just like you would if we were all together in one big room. Because it goes with our title today of Teaching Memory Strategies in Adult Education. The brain remembers what it pays attention to and what you're engaged and what it values. So I encourage you to be engaged and to, share all this with me. I will tell you also, I'm standing up now because I want to make sure that you know that I am engaged and here with you today. We've been doing a lot of online, which is great, and I'm so happy that we are able to do that, but I want to try to replicate as much as I can that kind of in-person experience. So speaking of that, I will get going. So may you never forget what is worth remembering, or remember what is best forgotten. So those are our words to start with today. And let's have a little pre-assessment. So this is the part where I'm going to ask you first to stand up. So how do you rate your memory? If your answer is that you have a great memory, stand up. Yep, I'm waiting for you to actually stand up if you have a great memory. And so for those of you who are very literal, let me just say that Big Sister Sarah really can't see you now. Don't freak out. That is not happening. I'm just asking you to, be on your honor system. So the great memory people, sit down. And what about I usually remember people? Stand up. Let's see who you are. All right. And then you sit down. And a couple of you raised your hands. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's always good to get that kind of interaction as you're doing a presentation. My last is, what was the question? For the people who can't remember what the question is, stand up. Little joke there, but hopefully you see that we're all different in our memory. You can sit down now. What was the question, people? Don't worry. We'll get to you. So what do you think? Do you think that I was born with my memory and what I have is what I have? If you're that kind of person, stand up. And now sit down, because here's the other option. And I'm going to guess that most of you are in the second category. I can improve my memory by learning new strategies by practicing. And the reason I'm assuming that is you probably wouldn't have come today if you didn't think that there would be some information to help you and to help your students. So let's get started. And what I'd like to do is show a little video. It's 2 minutes. So I think you'll find it interesting. It's about neuroplasticity and the effect that our brain and memory and continuing to learn over time. So let me bring that up.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
All right. All right. All right, so then we get back to the PowerPoint. I love this video. It really helps me to think about what are the pathways that I'm forming and how can I, and even when I'm trying something new, and let's face it, we've all tried a lot of new things in the last 4+ months. But I kept thinking to myself, I'm forming these new pathways that are good. And it's going to keep me, keep my brain young and healthy, which helped me to think about it in a positive way. So learning is how we acquire information. Memory is how we store that information. Education is about enhancing learning, and neuroscience is about trying to understand how learning and memory occur. So think about how that all works together, because memory is the glue that binds our mental life together. So if we want to help our students to learn as effectively as possible, we need to help them with that glue, or else they're not going to be able to remember, to recall, and to use the information that we share in class. So I like to think of learning as filing something in your brain. Can you remember, and it's up to you, feel free to stand up if you wish, raise your hand or shout hallelujah. Can you remember lyrics from your favorite song? Go ahead and just start singing it. You know, that's one of the good things about being remote. We can all just sing. I won't. Details of the best day of your life. Can you remember that? Most likely you can. What about what a friend told you about their job last week? That might have been a little bit more like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And what about, here's the last one, what you ate for lunch last week, Monday? Do you remember that? Most likely you don't remember those things. So what's different about the lyrics to your favorite song and the details of your best life? What's different about that than what you had for lunch last week, Monday? It's emotionally charged. It had value, and it, you know, hopefully brought you pleasure, and the brain does pay attention to that. So I wanted to ask you, is before we move forward, what implication does that have for us as educators? Knowing that the brain pays attention to things that are emotionally charged, that are pleasurable, that have meaning. We'll unpack that in a minute. So our learning is, our brain is an information processing system. So we get incoming stimuli all the time. Right now you're seeing, you're hearing, there might be other sound over here, there might be distractions going on. So it's what we see, hear, feel, and that goes into our short-term memory. The thing about our short-term memory is it's only held there for a few seconds. Unless we do something, unless we pay attention to that information and use it in our working memory to process it into our long-term memory. Because a lot of the things that come in, a lot of the stimuli actually get discarded. The majority of the things that come in get discarded unless you make a specific effort to notice and record information. It's not processed and learned. This is exactly why you're at a social function, or you used to be, and someone would come up and introduce themselves, and 10 seconds later, you can't remember what that person's name is. It's because we didn't pay attention to it. Maybe at the time they said their name, you know, you heard it, but then something happened over here that distracted you and it got discarded. So much of what we think we've learned was never really learned in the first place. And that's topic number one to think about, because unless we're paying attention, unless we're making a meaningful effort to associate this with something else, we're probably going to lose it. I was sharing with Sharon, that's hard to say, before we started about, I always encourage people as they age to not say, oh, my memory's not what it used to be, because we have so much going on that oftentimes that's what's really happening, is that we're just distracted. Last week, I drove to Target. I was on my phone on the Bluetooth talking to my sister. We had a deep conversation going. So at some point I parked and I continued to talk to her. And then eventually I hung up and I went in and I bought a few things and I came back out and I thought, I don't remember where I parked my car. But here's the thing. I didn't forget where I parked my car. I never paid attention in the first place. I was distracted whenever I showed up. And so that's a very different thing than forgetting I didn't pay attention in the first place, which leads me to my next quote that I love. The best advice I ever came across on the subject of concentration is, wherever you are, be there. That's hard to do in our current life because we have so many distractions. We have our cell phone, we have people talking to us, we've got stuff coming in all the time. And maybe you're on a webinar and you're distracted by email that's coming in, hopefully not. That's why I told you to be fully engaged, because it will make a difference whether you get information out of this session or not. So I love this little visual, and I share this with people all the time. This file drawer is a 5-year-old's brain. Okay, it's got some good organization starting out. They know their colors, and it's, you know, it's just open to put information in. It's very easy. There's lots of slots to put information in. This is our brains. This is people like us that have lived a while and we've experienced a lot of things, and there's just a lot of information in our brains. So if we try to put something else in, it's a little harder because we got to stick it in there. And so that's why it's not necessarily that your memory has failed, it's just that there's so much information, it might take you a little bit longer to find it, especially if your filing system looks like this particular picture. And also, let me just say before I move on, this is why you don't play that memory game with a 5-year-old, you know, because they're going red ball, triangle, triangle, they've got it, they're down. We're not gonna be able to beat them because they've got all those slots to put the information in. So before I talk more about how we can help our students and ourselves to improve our memory and to learn how to remember, I need to say something about protecting our memory. Because here's the thing, there are some things that we can do to protect our memory. A healthy diet, what we put into our bodies does make a difference. Regular exercise, that helps our brain to function better and to help us process information. Not smoking, keeping our blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar in check, and living a mentally active life. So sometimes our students don't have the luxury of everything on this slide. Sometimes they're working multiple jobs, and they may not be able to afford as healthy a food. And I just want to make sure that I mention that because we need to think about brain and memory in a very large scale. It's inside of our body, and how we treat ourselves is going to make a difference in how we remember and how we learn. All right, so I want to give a shout out to 3 books that I used for the research for this. You will see the Marilee Springer, How to Teach So Students Remember. Highly recommend this book. It's an easy read, it's a quick read, and you'll see a lot of information from this particular researcher. And then also The 7 Sins of Memory by Daniel L. Schachter. I love this book as well. Highly recommend it. And then lastly, Unlimited Memory by Kevin Horsley. So, reach and teach. That's our first R of learning and memory. And yes, I am going old school, and I know how to put things on a slide, and I thought about it, but I like that I'm going to hold something up, and we're going to practice this together in just a minute. So hang with me. But we're going to reach and teach. And in reaching and teaching, we need to understand about stimuli, attention, and learning. So we have 2,000 bits of information allowed in by the brain's filtering system every second. That's a lot. The brain retains about 1%. Remember I said most of it gets discarded? There you go, there's the research. And whether information is retained is dependent upon an individual's, and hear me now, if you're looking at email, come back, because this is really important. It's dependent on an individual's love for the subject matter, its dramatic, emotional, auditory, and visual impact. Okay, so what kind of implication does that have for us in our classrooms? The brain needs to value if you want that to retain that information. So part of it is, what does our instruction look like in our classrooms? How can we be a little more dramatic? How can we build in some emotions? How can we make sure there's multiple modalities so that they get that information in a lot of ways? Are we contextualizing what we're teaching? Because that's going to make a difference in the individual's love for the subject matter if I see the importance of what it is. So first, that's what we want to do when we reach and teach. So also important is to realize, and I'm going to start with that little box first, the brain cannot focus on learning if basic needs are not met. And emotions take precedence over all other brain processes. Okay, what kind of implications does that have for us? So the 4 essential criteria for gaining attention is need. Is it valuable? I've already mentioned that we need to make sure that we contextualize, that we need to make sure that students understand why they need this information. Novelty. The brain pays attention to things that are different, that are novel. We can't have everything novel, but we need to build in some surprises every so often, good surprises. Meaning. Does it have meaning to me? Am I making the connections to what I already know? One of the great things about teaching adults is they come to us with a lot of life experiences that we can build upon. And we need to help them to help us to build that meaning based on what they already know. And then emotion. I already mentioned about the emotion part. I had a professor in college many years ago in my special ed training that said if a student is too hot, too cold, too hungry, too tired, too stressed, they're not going to be able to learn to the full effect that they could. You can tell that really stuck with me because I still remember it today, and that was, I don't know, a long time ago. So again, we need to make sure to remember that we're teaching people, we're teaching content to people, but we're teaching people. So we want to make sure that we reach them on that human level. We can't change everything, but we can make our classrooms a safe place, a sanctuary, while providing challenge. I'm not saying make it super easy, but I am saying make it a safe place. Okay, our students remember what affects their lives. That kind of makes sense, right? But it's good to remember that. And I love this second quote, assessment is today's means of modifying tomorrow's instructions. So we want to make sure we build in a lot of assessments often, because then we know what our students are retaining and understanding and what they're not. So what we need to go back and review. So knowing that, here's a question for you. And I am going to be quiet for just a minute after I explain this, because I do expect you really to think about this and do something with it. The first question is, so what? What does what I've shared with you so far, why does that possibly matter in your classroom? And then secondly, the next question is, now what? What am I going to do about it? So I ask you now to jot down for yourself one thing that you can think of already that you can build into your classroom to help your students to learn more effectively and to increase their memory strategies. Okay, I know that wasn't a lot of time. I'm sorry. I'd love to spend the whole day with you, but we have a limit. So, and our author from How to Teach So Students Remember tells us retrieve information right after it's learned, because that promotes retention. So have students do this often. That's one of the things you can do, is stop periodically and give students a little bit of time to process. Make sure they make a note. I personally love also having students talk to each other. And even if we're remote, we can still do that. Put them in breakout rooms. Let them tell each other what they know, what they've learned. That's a very easy, valuable thing to do, because it helps them rehearse, and they hear, their brain hears what they say that they know, plus they get to hear from somebody else what they have learned, because that'll help to reinforce. So it's just a simple little, and I love to do that in person too, because it gets students up and moving around. Because here's the thing, if you've been sitting for a while, you may want to stand up, even though I'm not asking a question, but I'm gonna give you something to do in like 10 seconds. The reason I want you to stand up is if you've been sitting from the beginning, it's long enough that the blood has pooled in your seat and it's not in your brain where it needs to be actively engaged and learning. All right, so let's do a little review. So now stand up and shout with me. We've learned about reach and teach. One more time, reach and teach, really loud. And now we're gonna move on to reflect. So to help our students learn to remember, we need to reach and teach, and we need to reflect. So we want to make sure that we teach reflection in our classrooms. Thinking directives, questionings, journaling, and things like a PMI chart. And I have a PMI chart right here. It's in your handouts. I made this one, but it's very simple. It's like, what's good about what I've heard so far? What do I need more? What do I need more information about because I don't understand it, and what's interesting that I want to learn more about it. So it's a way of reflecting on what I've heard so far, making sure that you ask good questions for your students, like, have you ever had a time that you've used this information before? Is this related to something in your life? Can you compare and contrast? All things that are good questionings and help students to reflect. Collaboration is also a nice, great way to help students to reflect because they're working together and they're talking. And it's a huge work skill. So we want to make sure that we give that opportunity to our students, but make sure they understand why you're doing this. Because students often don't even think about the why of why teachers are doing things. But hey, I'm going to put you together in groups because it helps you to remember better whenever you are working together and collaborating. Plus, employers are going to expect you to collaborate whenever you have a job. It's as simple as that. All right, so we're going to have another little review. Remember, we're going to reach and teach, we're going to reflect, and we're going to recode. Next time I'll give you a better warning that that's coming so you can get up and really shout that out loud. So recoding is the ability to take information from different sources and generate it into your own language. Paraphrasing, summarizing are the teacher skills that we use for recoding. But it helps us to be able to put it into our brains in a way that it makes sense for us. So having students, once again, I really encourage you to tell your students when you have them paraphrase, make sure they understand the value of paraphrasing and where else they can paraphrase. So we use the strongest sensory pathway by providing choices, differentiation. So meeting students where they are and offering them appropriate and challenging options to achieve success. And then after showing understanding, we might stretch to cover standards that will be assessed. So let me back that up and give an example. Let's say that you're asking students to speak, to talk to each other, exactly the activity that I shared with you a little bit ago, to rephrase what you think you've learned today. Now, maybe the standard that we're trying to cover is a writing standard. So you're going, oh, Sarah, they need to get to write because that's the standard. That is important. But what I'm saying is, give students a chance to, it's a process, to get to where they're ready to write. They have to be able to reflect and recode before they're ready to actually meet that standard. And self-generated material is better remembered. So helping students to be able to create some things will make a big difference. All right, here's where you're involved again. How many of you raise your hand or jump up and if you have a place to put your keys in your home? Yep, the hands are going up. You got one. I know you guys all got one, right? Mm-hmm. All right, now sit down, put your hands down. How many of you have ever lost your keys? It's a new question. Jump up again if you've lost your keys at your home. Hopefully not on the beach. Knew somebody who did that once. It didn't turn out well. Okay. Yeah, so if you have a place to put your keys, then why do you lose them? For most of us, it's because we didn't actually put them where we were supposed to, because we weren't necessarily paying attention. You can't retrieve information that you haven't stored. So before, as I said, pay attention to what's going on. How often do we come home and we are thinking about something else or talking on the phone, or somebody hits you, not hits you physically, but something hits you as soon as you walk into the room, into your back door or wherever. And so you can't retrieve it because you haven't stored it there. So no attention equals no retention. I love that little quote. I encourage you to write that one down. It will be on the test. No attention equals no retention. For our students as well, share that with them. Make sure that they understand. And here's the thing. If you haven't already thought about this for our applications for our students is, we can only process so much information in a given amount of time. My favorite Far Side cartoon of all time is the kid that says, "Can I leave now?" He's in class. "My brain is full." So we can keep talking, but if our students are no longer paying attention, they are not learning, and they can only pay attention for so long. And that's why we want to get them up also. Okay, and thinking about recoding also, organization as a means of recoding. That's like note taking, making sure our students know how to take notes and then how to make sense of the notes that they have taken, which is another way to recode. If you rewrite them or rephrase them or reorganize our notes, now we are recoding, which is a very valuable strategy in remembering and learning. summarizing, putting it into your own words, classifying, organizing the information, comparing, and I said before the compare and contrast, and then lastly, explaining the information. So here's my question for you, and I really am going to be quiet again for just a minute because I want you to reflect on this, is how do you already do this in your classroom? Because I know if you've taught more than one day, you have already done some of this. How are you already doing it? Yep. And then second question is, how else could you do it? Is there something new that you could add? You don't have to go back to your classroom or your online teaching and change everything. What you need to do is think of what's one thing that I could integrate, that I could tweak, one thing that I can do to help my students recode. All right. Lastly, I encourage you to make the connection to life. This is a really good way to help our students to learn and to remember. If you're talking about something, ask them. You don't have to know everything about their lives, but ask them, you know, how have you used this in your life? How does this apply? I'm going to say the word contextualization one time again, because that is so important. If it makes sense to the student, they're going to remember it and they're going to retain it. Okay, it's time to review. Remember, I told you I was going to give you a better heads up. So stand up, clear your throat, because it's time to review. So far, we've learned about reach and teach, reflect, recode, and now we're down to reinforce. All right, so how are we going to reinforce? Think about how you reinforce in your classroom already. So it's providing verbal or symbolic reward for academic performance or effort. Offering encouragement, you're doing a good job. Specifically, you're doing a good job doing this. Opportunity to fortify what students understand. By having them tell you, then you can say this part was correct, but here's the thing. Sometimes we need to reshape or reteach because most of us don't get all the concepts first go round. We need to reinforce, we need to think about them again in another way. And we need to make sure that we do that, the understandings are correct. Do not allow students to practice something over and over. Practice meaning reinforce, that's wrong. Doing a whole worksheet of 30 questions and they did the problems, they did them all wrong. That's a problem because now it's been put into their long-term memory incorrectly. We want to make sure that we allow students to change their conceptual understanding before they rehearse for long-term memory so that when we're actually putting it in, we're putting it in correctly. Because once something's in wrong, it's hard to take it back out again if we think we know something that's not right. And that's coming from the book, How to Teach So Students Remember. So feedback is effective if it feeds forward, right? I love feeding forward because, and making sure that students understand that making a mistake is part of the learning process and helping them correct themselves, correct each other, and you correct them. That is reinforcement and helps to feed forward. I'm gonna try my best to do Yoda here. Oh, the greatest teacher failure is. Yeah, I know. So my kids are all grown, but this is why they used to roll their eyes at me a whole lot, is because I would say things like that to them. But I believe this Yoda quote. It is, failure is a great teacher. So make sure that we allow our students time to fail and to learn and to recode and reinforce and make it okay that they fail. For ourselves as well, all you perfectionists out there, I'm talking to you right now. So do not check your email. Listen to me, listen to Yoda. Okay, it's time to review again. So stand up, loud voices, everybody together. Reach and teach, reflect, recode, reinforce, and rehearse. I know it's getting too long. There's only a couple more. It's not fitting in the screen anymore. Here's the thing, what I'm just doing, you can do that. That's also another great way to help students remember because you do this whole visual cue thing and they're involved in it, they get up, they say it, it's going to help them because rehearsal really does help a lot. It helps to try out a newfound learning. And best learning occurs over time. If you were a person who tried to cram for a course, for an exam, you know that that usually doesn't work very well. Small chunks make a big difference, being able to rehearse. Multiple experiences lead to stronger memories. If you can help students make the more connections to the information that you're using, then they are going to be able to have multiple rehearsals. It's an opportunity for differentiation. You can rehearse in different ways. You can do either rote or elaborative. You might think rote memorization isn't a good rehearsal or it isn't a good way to learn, but there are some times that just memorizing things, and usually those times are when you are going to have to give that information back in just that exact same format in which you learned it. That's the rote time. Yeah, the elaborative is a larger, deeper learning, and for a lot of our students, we need to make sure that they truly understand on a deeper level. So that would be the elaborative rehearsal. Analyzing, evaluating, and creating, giving students those multiple applications to here's some information, another day, another piece of information, another information, let's put them together. Let's analyze and create something, putting them all together. Okay, both mental and physical rehearsals. Use your body. I love this. I love role plays. I have had students that come up to me in the store that, I've had years ago, and they still remember the things that we did, that we got up and moving, because it made an impression on them. Physical rehearsals would be things like, you're teaching angles, and you actually put your body in a 45-degree angle or a 90-degree angle. I know teachers who do that. It has great effects. Make sure the students get to do that too. They get up and actually are a bar chart. They're part of a bar chart, bar graph in the classroom. Associations across disciplines makes much deeper learning whenever it's like, okay, we learned this here, and we learned this in writing, and this in math, and now we're going to reflect on it, we're going to write on it. Memory aids like graphic organizers. Role plays, I already put my plug in for role plays. Love those. Here's the thing. Let me just say before we move on from role plays, because I know some of you are shaking your head, I can see you. Those students who want to have your attention, who want to get up and put on a show, let them do it. But let them do it within the constraints of what is okay for you as an educator. It's your classroom. For those students, I will say also, some people are very uncomfortable with role play, so we need to be careful with them. I will tell you from personal experience that over time, oftentimes if you don't push and you have fun with it and it's a safe, supportive environment, then those students over time will kind of come around and maybe I'm okay with role plays. And let me say also, because I'm really into role plays and use your body, I remember the student who met me in the store and said they still remember, it had to do with, we were doing the Bill of Rights. And each group had to take a bill and act it out, and the rest of the students had to guess. Now, obviously we'd already had a lesson and they already knew about them. So of course, bear arms, they did the whole bear arms thing. It wasn't bear arms, it was bear arms. So they remembered it. It was fun. And then mnemonics, I will say I love mnemonics, but some of our students don't. So if they don't, and it's actually extra work for them, any of these memory aids need to be helpful. If they're not, abandon ship for sure. We don't need to give our students anything new to learn that's not helpful for them. Okay, so I want you to think for just a minute. Once again, I have Linda Richmond here. If you don't know who that is, you can Google her later, old time Saturday Night Live. How can I add more rehearsal time in class? Discuss. If you were sitting together, I would have you discuss amongst yourselves, but I want you just to jot something down, or you can put it in the chat so you can actually sort of discuss with each other, what could you do to have more time to rehearse what you already know? All right. Again, I wish we had more time to talk about this. This is definitely an overview. So one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is grab a colleague tomorrow, well, Monday, and have a conversation about this, brainstorm about it. Time to review, because review's on the screen. Stand up, say it loud, say it proud. We're going to reach and teach. We're going to reflect. We're going to recode. We're going to reinforce. We're going to rehearse, and we're going to review. In case you're wondering, for those of you who are agenda followers, we only have one more after this, okay? And we'll pull it all together. So review. Okay, hold on. I got a question for you. How many of you review in your classroom? If you do, stand up. Raise your hand. Okay, good. I love all that review. Great. Now, sit down if you wait until test time to review. Hopefully you're reviewing often, because our brains pay attention to what we rehearse, and reviewing often is going to help us remember. And waiting too long right before the test may not be too long, and we will have remembered, because review can alleviate some of the sins of memory. Remember I showed you a book called The 7 Sins of Memory? A couple of them I want to mention here. One is blocking. So you know the information, but you can't retrieve it. That would be not the example that I gave you, that you met somebody at a party the first time. You probably just didn't even pay attention. That's why you can't remember their name. But somebody that you know from before, and you run into them and you're blocked because you can't remember that name, or you can't remember that word, but then later, you know, when you're relaxed and not thinking about it, it pops into your head. So it wasn't that you didn't remember it, you blocked that information. Transience is fading over time. So if you have a memory, but you don't rehearse it and review it, it's probably going to fade. And then one of my favorites is misattribution. That's where you know some information and some other information, you put it together to make something that's not really right. I think in our society now that happens a lot, because we have so much information being thrown at us. And so we think we remember something that we heard on the news over here and something that our neighbor told us over there, and we put it together, it's not quite right, which can be a real problem. So my favorite story to illustrate misattribution comes from many years ago when I was a brand new special ed teacher. And I was subbing at the time, and I came into a K-5 school and didn't know any of the teachers there. And I was subbing for a reading specialist. So the kids came from another classroom for an hour and spent time with me, and then they went back to the classroom. So I had multiple groups of kids come and spend time with me and go back to the classroom. So now it's lunchtime, and I go into the teacher's lounge, and they all turn and stare at me, which, you know, I'm young and new, and I'm like, whoa, what's this? And they go, hey, we need to know your name. And I said, well, my name's Sarah Goldammer. And they said, oh, so glad, because our kids came back and told us that we have a sub today, and her name is Mrs. Golddigger. So, you know, it was something they sort of knew and something I told them, and they put it together to be something else. One of the other kids apparently came back and said my name was Mrs. Goldammit. So they were very happy that neither one of those were my names. Okay, so we can review, and that can help increase the length of time that students can remember if we review often. Practice tests. I know people don't like testing and they don't like quizzes, but it actually can help increase test scores in the future if we give, you know, multiple assessments, multiple opportunities to review. And we want to make sure that they're adequately spaced reviews, because that actually, if you're saying, oh, Sarah, that takes a lot of time to review, but it's going to save time in the long run if we put those in. So let me give you a little graphic here of this is what the top one is, what oftentimes happens. We have some instruction, and then we get close to the assessment time or the test time, and we review. What research is suggesting to us is we have some instruction, we review. And maybe the next day we review again, and then we have a little more instruction, and then we review. And then we have more instruction, and then we review right before the assessment. So it spreads it out. So those little diamonds that you see on the screen are the review times. So think about, could I bring in more review in my classroom? All right, here we go. We're pulling all together. Last time, no, not really. There'll be one more time after this. Stand up, say it loud. We're gonna reach and teach. We're gonna reflect. We're gonna recode. We're gonna reinforce. Oops, sorry. We're gonna rehearse. We're going to review, and we're going to last our retrieve. All right, retrieving. It's the ability to bring a past event or prior knowledge to one's mind. Our brains will logically access memories that are useful, that have been repeated, and that require the least effort. One more time for anybody who's checking email, let me tell you, come back because this is a big one. Our brains will logically access memories that are useful, so they need to have some importance, that have been repeated, that we've heard more than once, or reviewed and retrieved more than once, and that require the least effort. Take our students through the steps to provide the necessary repetition and ensure that required memories won't be too difficult to access. Okay. Retrieval is critical for robust, durable, long-term learning. And every time that a memory is retrieved, that memory becomes more accessible in the future. Think back to that video that we had before about neuroplasticity, right? Remember those pathways? I think about that now every time that I'm learning something new. I think about those pathways getting stronger and more ingrained. And every time that I review what I've learned and retrieve it again, then that memory becomes stronger. We want to think about retrieval-based learning. So we don't wait to the test to retrieve, we retrieve every day. So retrieval is not just a knowledge check, it's a learning tool. Use learning tools often and make sure they're interspersed in learning. And I would encourage you to convert existing activities into retrieval-based learning activities, because that's the beginning of organization, and the brain is helped out by organizing. So how would you do this? Let me just give you an example of one way. And if we had more time, I decided to leave this in, even though we only have an hour, but making a mind map on memory and learning. That's an opportunity to retrieve and an opportunity to organize the information. So you know what a mind map is? The middle would be a circle that say memory and learning, and then we'd have these little lines going out, and everything that you've learned about it, you would put out there. And then you would maybe make some notes about what you want to do with that and what's important about it. That would be a way that you could immediately retrieve the information that you've learned. Mind mapping is a great way to help our students also retrieve that information if they have to work in a group, because we talked about collaborating, good learning skill, good work skill, and also that would be a way to sit down and organize everything that they have learned. So you can put just about anything in the middle and then retrieve the information that goes around the outside. All right, before we move off of this, I told you there'd be one more time. So let's go through it one more time. Stand up. This is the last time. So do it with gusto. We're going to reach and teach. Whoops. We're going to reflect. We're going to recode. We're going to reinforce. We're going to rehearse. We're going to review. And we're going to retrieve. So that's what we're going to do with our students and with ourselves. Because I really encourage you, I told Sharon that when I started working with this kind of research, it really helped me to figure out what I needed to do for myself. All right, so I mentioned that there was a handout for you on the plus minus PMI chart. So that's one tool that you can use with students. Getting them to get up and move around and talk to each other, or get into breakout rooms and talk to each other, another one. The Reach and Teach list is also a handout for you if you want to do something with that. And then the last thing is what you see up on your screen. It's the 10 mind hacks to make you a better learner. Let me take you through this as an opportunity, because we only have a few minutes left, to review and to reflect on what we've learned so far. So the first mind hack is make it weird. The brain pays attention to what is novel, to what is different, drama. It works. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, that's okay. You know, you can pull in videos, you can pull in other speakers, you can pull in all kinds of representation. It's also a good UDL factor. So let me just put a little plug in for that. And if, again, you have students who want to be noticed, let them do some things, make it weird. Stimulate multiple senses. Try to taste, touch, and smell something to help you remember a bit of information. Multiple senses, multiple modalities are going to make a difference. If the brain gets it in multiple ways and embeds it in different ways, we're going to remember it more effectively. Teach it. You all already know that teaching something makes you understand it at a much better level. So 70%, that's the percentage of what students remember when they teach their peers. I love peer teaching for so many reasons. I think I've mentioned them along the way, but allow your students to be the experts on something. Use patterns, numbers and shapes, rhymes and rhythms. The brain loves patterns. That's why doing things, clapping it out systematically, rapping a song, singing a song, that's why we remember it, is because it has a pattern. So again, maybe you can't sing, but that doesn't mean you can't bring music into your classroom. That doesn't mean that you can't have someone else sing. If you've got talented students like that, which I'm sure you do, allow them to use their talents. Mold into many formats can help us remember it more easily. Instead of just reading, we try to find the topic in a video or an art form or an audio book. And let me just mention, especially from teaching remotely, there's so many resources at our fingertips to say, oh, I can run out and grab this, or I can grab that information to give it to people in a different way. Humanize it. Information that touches our emotions sticks to us. Empathy is the strongest foundation for memory that we possess. So having a case study or a story, connect as much as you can to the human way. Stay away from those negative events. Start with something that's familiar. We want to make sure that we make that connection. Our students come with rich experience bases. Many of them are very good problem solvers for life's problems. So we want to make sure that we hook what we're teaching to what they already know. It's going to make a big difference. Divide and conquer. Remember I mentioned small chunks, and I mentioned small chunks, and make sure you have small chunks because it's going to make a big difference. 7 is the number of information items our brain can handle in a short-term memory. So think about that. If we give too much information without time to reflect, too much information without retrieving it, then they're not going to remember it. And we're not going to either. So this is true for ourselves as well. Number 9, act it out. Yep, Sarah's favorite, got to role play it. I love the drama because the brain pays attention to it. 90% is the percentage of what students remember when they engage in hands-on learning. And then number 10, a close second to role play, is seal it with some sleep. Sometimes in our society, sleep gets a bad rap, but sleep is really important because long-term memory is created while we're resting. So you need to be careful not to cram too much in. Sleeping after studying actually will benefit you. I used to do that as a college student. I would lay my head on my textbook after I read it and go to sleep. I tried to convince myself that there was some osmosis going on. I'm not sure there was, but there is research that shows that sleeping right after studying can actually help. But you need to make sure that you're alert and awake as possible while learning, because if you're falling asleep while you're reading your textbook, I've done that too, that's a problem. So again, thinking about for our students, oftentimes they are very busy and they're tired because they have a lot of demands on themselves. So we need to think about how we're giving them information, how we're asking them to retrieve that information, and how we can best support them in our classrooms and for their learning. Okay, which leads us to action, because knowledge is power, but it's only powerful if we do something with it. It's because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So I'm assuming you came here today because you wanted a little something different for your own memory and for your students. So I ask you again, what's one new thing that you will implement in your classroom? You don't have to change everything. Just think of one thing. And then I want you to turn to your dog or your cat or whoever's with you right now, or just shout it out loud. Seal it. This is what I'm going to do. Okay, good. Or, you can write that down too on your notepad. Then I encourage you strongly to talk with a colleague in a day or two and brainstorm and think, what else? So we're almost at time, but I will stay around for a second if Sharon's okay with that to answer any questions if I have any. But I also want to mention just real quickly, because I think most teachers love a teacher-created resource. And I have a new book series that I've just put out. It's at a 4th grade reading level, but I wrote this with adults in mind, because remember I told you I've been in adult education this is my 20th year, exploring careers using the career clusters and the career pathways. So I'll mention that as well, and then just put up my contact information if I can be helpful to you, if I can answer questions or give you some resources, would definitely be willing to do that. So Sharon's putting up a poll. I think that means it's time. So thank you everybody for joining.
Yes, Sarah, before you go, there's some great questions, just a few of them in the chat box.
Okay.
There was 3 different people who asked the same question about getting the list of books. So
Okay.
I don't know if you can send those to us, we'll make sure we include that in the email out to everybody. We can also put it in the chat box if you'd like.
Okay.
So that was one. The question, what is a PMI chart? That was another one that came up.
Just, it's a way to kind of review. It's plus, minus, interesting. And you guys, I just made this. It's one of the handouts for today, so you'll have access to this, but I just made it as a Word document. It's a way to help reflect on, what did I learn? What do I need to learn more about? And what's interesting that I want to learn about in the future.
Great. And then there's one lady who asked, in the classroom, I do okay at not letting my students practice things incorrectly. Any suggestions for how to make that happen with online learning?
I think, and personally, I think it's helpful to make sure that students understand themselves. So there's nothing here that I shared today that couldn't be or shouldn't be shared with your students. I would encourage them to understand themselves, that you need to make sure, and let me relate that to, like we get a lot of information thrown at us in our world today. If we read something and it's incorrect and we decide to go with that, that's a problem. We need to ask, is this right? We need to research it back. I think we need to teach our students to do that. And then also with assignments, encourage them to have multiple checks. Let them know that you will be happy to help check if they're doing it correctly, or show them resources that they have access to that will help them to figure out for themselves whether this is correct or not.
Wonderful. There's also another question here. Do you have a reference slide? So references slide.
I don't. I just put the references on the slides as they went, but I will be happy to share with COABE the books that I referenced. And then also, Sharon, I believe that this whole PowerPoint is available as well. And
Sure.
so if they want to go back and look at any of the references, they can gather those there.
Wonderful. Yes. So I wanted to mention to everybody, and I've been putting this in the chat, or I'm sorry, in the Q&A, that as we had mentioned at the start of this webinar, everything will be archived in our adult educator repository. That's free of charge to our members to go in and check that out. And it's archived, for as long as we're around. So this wonderful presentation will be available to the more than 800 people that registered for this webinar. So with that, Sarah, I just want to say thank you. I want to thank all of our participants today. This was a wonderful session. I will remember this. So you did a great job. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you at the next webinar. Bye now.